Well, joining us now from Alice Springs is Rosalie Kunoth, a Central Australian Indigenous elder who, as a young woman, played a starring role in the movie Jeddah. She's a leader of the First Nations movement, which wants sovereignty and self-determination for Indigenous people. And in the studio here with me is Tom Calma. He's co-chair of Reconciliation Australia and a member of the Recognise organisation. He wants a referendum to recognise Indigenous Australians in the Constitution sooner rather than later. Thanks to both of you for being here. Now, Rosalie, what do you think of what Muramu has done up in northern Queensland?
I am absolutely thrilled that he has found truth in his journey. The truth is that we are sovereign people of this country. Therefore, we do not need to sort or to look for approval by anyone. We have a continuing history, and that has never ever been ceded.
Now, Rosalie, do you think there'll be groups of people in the Northern Territory who'll watch that and think that's a good idea to completely secede from Australia?
I believe there will be a mixture, but I do also believe there is a lack of concentration or comprehension of people in the Northern Territory because we are tribal lands in this part of our country. Tribal lands with the original constitution, if we must use that word, in place, with a different language, and also probably still living in a fool's paradise, not realising that we are being assimilated to such an extent that we don't even know where we belong anymore.
Tom Calma, let me bring you in, and on the Muramu thing, I don't imagine that's something you'd encourage.
Well, look, I think it's important for everybody to create their own identity. This is why we're so fortunate in Australia that we're able to express who we are and not have any fear of reprisal from government and so forth. So, you know, if Murama and others want to go down that track of identifying as separate sovereign nations, so be it. That's their right to do that.
I've got to ask you the obvious question. What does he do if he needs to go to hospital or something? Does he go across the border into Australia and does he still get access to Medicare?
Well, I'm not sure.
We saw the problems with his son
I think
getting
that
into school.
from what he's saying, if he can't get into school, his chances of getting Medicare are going to be limited. But you know, he could express it through different ways of traditional medicine, and we have some very strong and robust traditional medicines going on in Australia through the nunkeries who operate very successfully, and they're Indigenous healers.
Now, Tom, this issue of sovereignty, Aboriginal sovereignty, has been around for a very long time now. Does it in any way threaten, in your opinion, the push for a constitutional referendum?
No, not at all. And I think you know, what's very important is that you look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people around the nation. Some are very secure because they know their identity, where they come from. They have the relationship with the land, culture, language and so forth. Others have been taken away, and so they don't have that relationship, but they know the country that they come from, and they may feel that they're much better accepted within their own tribal groups or community groups than they are in the wider society. So they'll express themselves like that. But in relation to the general movement to have a look at constitutional reform and the recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, these processes can coexist. And you know, and I think as
you
an
mean sovereignty, a treaty, and the whole process of the referendum
reform
as well,
constitutional
reform as well.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if that satisfies Rosalie Kunoth. What do you think about this push for recognition in the Constitution? Because I've heard you say you don't want to be swallowed up into the Constitution.
That may have been my words. The fact remains, the truth is, we do not belong in the foreign constitution, which is only over, you know, very short period. It's only over 230 or so years. I think what we are seeking is acknowledgement of the fact this country is not terra nullius. The fact there is an alternative culture that needs to be recognised by Australian settlers. I realised that the settlers that were unleashed on us with the first fleets were also abused and brutalised people. Our short history in that period of time has not enhanced any good feelings. And if you stop and think of the inclusiveness of Aboriginal people, the original people of this country, they are so inclusive. And the other thing is that they care for each other in the traditional way is holistic. And this is what I've just come out of hearing the old songs being sung and young girls dancing and reasserting and reclaiming their land and their identity, which they've never lost. And I think I said right at the beginning, maybe we are living in a fool's paradise, that we still have our languages, that we still have relationship with each other, real in-depth relationship, a real humanity towards each other. This is lacking when we come into the outskirts of townships and there is a feeling of conflict. That needs to be addressed by a truth and justice journey for us all people of this country, to look at the truth and to seek justice.
Rosalie,
and we only can do that from a place of equality. We certainly are not equal in this country, because everything that is handed down to us, whether it's through the policies from the federal government, is towards assimilation. We do not want to be assimilated to the cost of losing our identity. This is what we're saying, and I don't think that is too deep for anyone to understand.
Okay, well, let's hear Tom on that. I mean, I don't imagine you disagree in many respects to what
not at all.
Rosalie is saying, but there is around the group that she's talking about a profound opposition to the constitutional recognition, or even the notion that it's necessary.
Yeah.
This fear of assimilation, is that one that you share?
Well, yeah, it's been a long-term, government policy to try and assimilate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people into the mainstream culture. It's been successful in some regards, many people, and let's not forget that we've got about 700,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia. Many of those, the majority, live in urban and regional townships who've been disassociated with their land in part. Some are still able to associate with their land and culture, but many aren't, and so there is already a movement. The real issue, I think, here is that where people want to be able to express their relationship to land and culture, they should be able to do that. If they do that by the way of sovereignty, and whatever sovereignty may mean to them, because we're all sovereign people in our own right. We don't need government to give us any.
But Tom, there's this referendum coming up, or we hope it will be coming up. We're not 100% sure whether it will or how long it might take. But the constitutional lawyer George Williams, we've spoken to him. He believes constitutional recognition is a possible first step towards a treaty.
Exactly, that was
my next step.
I agree totally, and Megan Davis, Larissa Brent, and co have also said very similar things, and we've seen that if we look at now. Rosalie mentioned about terra nullius, and that was the doctrine that existed in Australia when the first fleeters first came, and that basically means that there were no people in Australia. But we know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been here for 60,000+ years. That was not overturned until 1992 with the Mabo decision.
But Tom, just let me put to Rosalie the point you just made. This constitutional lawyer, Rosalie, says that if you have constitutional recognition, a treaty will be easier, and Tom is saying it's one of the next steps. Do you think, is that an argument for actually getting on board with a constitutional recognition process?
I wish I could say yes, Tom, but
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
I have not seen anything to trust the assimilationist progress, which has somehow speeded up. I have not seen anything whereby I can say, yes, I will forget about my ancestral 60,000 years or more old constitution of this country. Although unwritten, it is there. And it continues in the songs.
Yes.
It continues in our relationship with the physical side of the lands from which we began yonks ago.
Yeah.
I cannot bring myself to say, yes, I will trust in the government of today. No, I cannot. And I am quite sure that there may be a different journey for those people, which, as you say, Tom, has the right to take their choice and to live in the mainstream, as we call it. But for those people that are tribal and probably do not understand the journey on which we've embarked.
Yeah, Rosalie, I'm just
Those are the people
Rosalie, I'm sorry
with whom I am still here.
Yes.
We're very glad you're still there, and I just want to throw, because we're running out of time, I'm afraid, I want to throw to the last word to Tom, and it's a big point here. You know that Tony Abbott, who says he's the Indigenous Prime Minister, said he'll sweat blood for this.
Yeah.
Now, he's actually, he's promised that there will actually be a meeting between political leaders and Indigenous leaders. Have you any idea when that will happen?
No idea, but we should also indicate that the opposition is party to this agreement as well. Reconciliation Australia was working with the Prime Minister's office to facilitate this meeting.
But you haven't got a timetable?
We don't have a time. It's still with the Prime Minister's office. I think, and this will maybe appease some of the concerns that Rosalie and others have. We have to see the goodwill expressed by the Prime Minister and the Parliament to be able to give a little ground. We've got to make sure that the parliamentary committee that Ken White leads comes out with a set of wordage that's going to go in the referendum. They're very important. The membership, the meeting of the leadership is going to be important, and having a cross-section of people. But we shouldn't forget always that as Aboriginal people, we have a right to sovereignty. We have a right to be able to express, to get a treaty. But that doesn't mean that it has to be, taking over from any rights that the general population have. And I want to finish by saying that I think we have seen a maturing of Australian society. We've got, so far, you mentioned 250,000 people on board. We've got about 80% of people willing and happy to support a referendum. We've got about 6% of the Aboriginal population indicating that they're opposed because they'd prefer sovereignty and a treaty. We say they can coexist, as can other proposals as put by Noel Pearson recently of a declaration aspirational document that can coexist. But the main game is to get the constitutional recognition, because once it's entrenched in the Constitution, it then takes another referendum to change it. If it's in legislation or it's goodwill, that's changed by the whim of the Parliament of the day.
Okay, Tom, we're out of time, I'm afraid. And Rosalie Kunoth, thanks very much. We're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Thanks to both of you.